Hey there, pre-med. We have reached the end of the 2025 MCAT season and we're starting up with 2026. Today we're talking about the first step of the MCAT process, which is of course MCAT registration, choosing a test date, and building your study plan. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to register for the MCAT. There are things that are important to know, the MCAT test dates that have been released, AAMC updates. There are some new features. So for those that have been studying for the MCAT for a while, I do have some new updates for you from the AAMC. How to choose a test date that is right for you, your goals, your application timeline, all of those features, and of course, what to do once you've registered. For those that are new here, I'm Amanda Brem, and I teach MCAT prep through the Brem method, my company. I also help institutions with academic excellence, and I am here for you throughout your MCAT journey. I'm glad you found me, and let's dive in to discussing MCAT registration. So the MCAT dates start in January. This upcoming year, 2026, January 9th is going to be our first available test date. There are never any test dates October, November, and December. They go through mid-September. This year they ended on September 13th. In 2026, we're going to have our very last test date on September 12th. And then a new feature is there will be a new test date on February 13th, Friday the 13th. We then have 2 test dates in March, several in April, and then a whole bunch in May and June. And then we're back down to 2 in July, a few more in August, and then again, our last round of test dates in September. So notice there's not that many test dates, and they're usually only a couple on Saturdays and a couple Thursday, Fridays. So you can't just take the MCAT whenever. You have to know when you're taking it, and you have to prepare accordingly because oftentimes you're only going to get one seat, and there's often wait lists to get other ideal seats. So we really want to make sure that your test date that you choose is appropriate for you, you have enough time to prepare, and you're not moving that test date around. It's not like the SAT or the GRE where it gets administered all the time. Other things to note, the MCAT is always administered at 8 a.m. local time at Pearson VUE testing centers. Pearson VUE testing centers are all over the country in various places, usually in cities. You can Google Pearson VUE testing centers in your area to see where they are related to your current living situation or your institution. But note that you have to take the MCAT at these centers. You cannot take them on campus, you cannot take them at home. For my international crew, there are very limited spots. It's important to go to the international test-taking website on the AAMC and make sure that you know where those tests are going to be administered. There are often less test dates than in the US, so even more important to plan this out ahead of time. Okay, let's walk through the steps of how to register just so you're prepared. It's kind of like getting Taylor Swift concert tickets. It's a little intense depending on where you live. We're going to talk through registration, then we'll talk through how to choose a test date that's appropriate for you and your goals. So we're going to go to the AAMC website. I just want to guide you there because sometimes it's a little weird. So aamc.org will take you to this main page here. At the very top, there is this Students and Residents button. If you click on it, it will take you to this other page that tells you to apply to medical school. So we're going to click here, and then we're going to go to register for the MCAT exam. If you go to take the MCAT exam, it gives you general information. So let's click register for the MCAT exam, and we can see here that we've got all sorts of information. Here's where the calendars are. The Canadian and international calendars are here as well, in addition to announcements about the 2026 testing year. To register, you're going to click this button. You can do this now. So to register, you're going to click, you're going to have to log in. If you've never logged into the AAMC before, it'll prompt you to make an account. But once you log in, it's going to take you to this page. This page, if you've taken any exams before, you can see I have a history. You can go ahead and look at those exams at any given time. But what I want you to focus on is this right-hand page. You can go ahead and put in all this information ahead of the registration day, and I highly recommend doing so and making sure it's nice and accurate. You go in here, you put in all of your personal information. You can put in all of your degrees, parent, guardian background, all these things. It's pretty intensive. It takes at least 15 minutes, so give yourself plenty of time. One caveat here. I want you to make sure that your name that you put on this registration page that you've put into this AAMC account matches the ID that you're going to use on test day. And the reason why is because they will cross-reference your registration with your ID, and if you're using your nickname for your registration, but your full name is on your ID, they will not let you test. So I'm Amanda. If my ID says Amanda, but I wrote Mandy on my registration, they would not let me test. So make sure that your names match up. It's first name and last name that matters. Middle names, it's okay if that's omitted or only an initial. So once you put all that information in, you are ready to register for the MCAT, but you're not going to be allowed to do so until October 21st and 22nd of 2025. Usually it's always the third week-ish in October, so if you're not planning on taking your MCAT till 2027 and you're just here learning about it, it's always going to be around that third week in October that they're going to open the AAMC MCAT dates for the next upcoming year. Typically in the past, they have split the time for registration where they'll open up the first 6 months of test dates and then open up the next 6 months of test dates in February. This year, they're opening for the entire year starting in October. So that's one of the changes, is that you can register for an August test date on October 21st or 22nd. So be prepared to know when you're taking your exam, and feel free, if you know you're going to take it later in the summer and you want to guarantee your seat, to schedule it out in advance and have that locked in. Now, and I say 21st and 22nd, how do you know which date is your registration? It depends on the region. So up here on the map, the purple states are going to be on the 21st at noon Eastern time. So even if some of those states you're in Central Coast time, it's going to be noon Eastern time is when that registration portal is going to open. For the teal states, it's going to be on the 22nd, again, Eastern time. So even though you may be in California or on the West Coast, you are going to have that noon Eastern time. This applies also to Hawaii and Alaska. So basically anybody but the East Coast will be on the 22nd. For international testers, which include Canada, Puerto Rico, US territories, and other international countries that are not the US, this is going to be on October 3rd at noon Eastern time. So even if you're in the Philippines, even if you're in Japan, if you are taking your exam in those countries, the registration is opening at noon Eastern time. So why am I telling you this? Why is this important? In certain areas, not all places, but in certain areas, these test dates go like hotcakes, all right? If you're in New York, if you're in LA, if you are in Chicago, if you are in a rural area that only has one Pearson VUE testing site, but a pretty big pre-med program at your university, you may have to compete for those spots. What that means is that I want you to get logged in and ready to register 10 minutes before it opens, whether it's the 21st, 22nd, or 23rd. You're more likely to get your spot early if you register. I have had students that have logged in the 24th, 25th of October, and all the seats are taken. So it's a good idea if you think you might have an area that is competitive or has a lot of pre-medical students and or limited seats, it's a good idea to get that registration in early so you can get your ideal spot, your ideal date, and your ideal place. When you go log in, there's no difference between logging in 20 minutes early, 15 minutes early, or 11 minutes early. What they do, and they explain this in the webinar that you're free to go watch on their website, is at 10 minutes to noon. So at 11:50 Eastern time, they put you in a waiting room and random sort anyone who's in that waiting room into an order. So you'll have a number of when you're going to go into the actual portal and choose your test date. After that point, if you log in at 11:52, you are going to get put to the back of the line. So my recommendation, log in just before 11:50 Eastern time, get all settled in, and get ready to register. Now, year over year, it has felt very different for students. I've had some years where students have been waiting for hours to get off the waiting list and into the portal. I have other times and other students who say it took 10, 15 minutes. Now, if you don't get your spot, do not panic. You will be able to put yourself on a wait list, and as spots come available, you'll be able to get off that wait list. Now let's talk about the money. When you register for the MCAT, you do have to pay the registration fee in full. That fee is $345 as of 2025 fall. It's an additional $120 for international students for processing fees. That is a hefty fee, so be ready to pay it on the day that you register. If you think you may qualify for the Fee Assistance Program through the AAMC, now would be the time. If you're watching this before registration would be the time to apply for the Fee Assistance Program. It usually takes 5 to 10 business days to process. This is for students who may qualify for fee assistance due to their income or their parents' income if they're under 26. They have really clear parameters around what will and will not qualify, so you can check out the Fee Assistance Program page. But I highly recommend, if you think you might qualify, to please apply for this because that drops the registration fee down to $140. It also gives you free access to the AAMC online bundle, which includes going to be 7 exams and all their practice sets. So we've now paid our fees. You log in, you get your test date, and then what you want to do immediately after you get your test date is put in the rescheduling fee dates. So what do I mean by that? You can reschedule your MCAT at any time, but the closer you get to your test day, the more money you're going to have to spend to reschedule. So if you're more than 60 days before your MCAT, so if your MCAT is in March and you're in January, early January, December, you decide to move your test date, you only have to pay a $50 fee, and less if you're on the fee assistance program. If you're within 60 days, but more than 30 days outside of your exam, so if you're more than 30 days from your exam, but within 60, you will have to pay $100. If you are within 30 days of your exam, you'll have to pay $200 to reschedule, or you won't get any money back if you cancel. And within 10 days, you cannot reschedule your exam. This is super important. You cannot reschedule and you cannot cancel your exam if you are less than 10 days out. So I always have all my students put these dates into their calendar, and my recommendation, we'll talk about this, is to put a practice exam right before those dates. So that way you can assess your progress and make sure that you are still committed to the test date that you signed up for. If you want to learn more about exactly how the registration portal works or what it looks like or how you choose based on zip code for your Pearson VUE Testing Center, definitely feel free to check out the video from the AAMC which walks through what the portal looks like, just so you can be prepared and you're not feeling anxious or nervous during that registration process. Okay, so now we know how to register, but how do you choose which date to register for? This is a very important and very personal discussion. So I'm going to give you some decisions to make on your own, but each of you is going to choose whatever test date works best for you. There are 3 main qualifiers that I always tell students to consider when scheduling a test date. The first is whether or not you're planning to apply the year you're taking your MCAT. If you're planning to apply to medical school in 2026 and take the MCAT in 2026, we have to make sure that that timeline works out effectively. Applications for medical school open in June, May or June, depending on the types of programs you're applying to, in basically late spring, early summer. Generally speaking, we want to have an MCAT score that we're going to apply with in that end of spring, early summer, which means we need to plan to take that MCAT and get the score back. It takes 30 full days to get your score back, and these scores get automatically submitted to the AMCAS or ACOM application. So you don't have to do anything, but it is going to take a full month to get those scores. If you want to see your scores before deciding which schools to apply to, that means that you want to have your scores before submitting those applications. So it's important to make sure that you know that and know that you have a month delay between taking your exam and seeing your score reports. Now, this is important to talk to your pre-health or pre-med advisor about strategically making sure that you have all the pieces you need for your application and making sure that you know when you're getting your MCAT score back. For many students, the latest we'll have students take the MCAT is April or May if they're applying that same year, unless they're in a very specific program that has them take the exam in June and have that application go through and be ready for review in mid-July. Number 2, do you have enough time to prepare for the MCAT? I am so serious about this. I can't tell you how many students I've talked to who told me that, hey, Amanda, I just took the MCAT and kind of winged it and went to see how it was, and I got a terrible score, and now I don't know what to do. This is a very big mistake, in my opinion, because 3 reasons. Number 1, schools see all your scores. This is not like the SAT. You don't get to pick and choose which scores get sent to schools. Schools will see all of your scored attempts. Number 2, this is a 7.5-hour exam. It is exhausting to go through and can be very demoralizing if you're not prepared. We want to make sure you're going in and putting your best foot forward. And then number 3, this test is not possible to wing, I don't think. It's not an easy test to take. It requires a ton of work and preparation, and very, very few students are going to perform well without preparation. So we don't want to set you up for failure. We don't want you to get a bad score that's then going to get reported to schools just because you didn't try. So we want to always give our best effort for every attempt we're taking. Now, sometimes that may mean that I have students take the exam knowing we're going to retake, but they're still putting their best effort forward. And that's an important consideration, is that do I have the time to put in good quality effort before my test day? What does good quality effort look like? The AAMC says, and I agree, that a minimum of 300 quality hours is required before you take your exam. For many students, we're not able to study full-time for the MCAT because you have other things going on to boost your pre-med application, like classes, volunteering, clinical work, research work, also having a life and being a person and taking care of family members and yourself, right? It's hard to just study for the MCAT. So for many students, this is a months-long endeavor. Usually my average for my students is 4 to 6 months, averaging about 15 to 25 hours of quality study per week. It's what we require in our classes and what we recommend in general for many students. So it's important to really realistically assess, are you able to put in the work to get to your goal score, or are you hoping for a miracle? Are you hoping for time to just appear out of the sky? So make sure that you have that plan, and if you're in doubt, push it a little bit, all right? If you're not sure you can get it done, push it. The third consideration is what else is going on in your life at that time. Ideally, you're picking an exam date that has nothing else going around it. No graduation, midterms, finals, a family member's wedding, right? We want to keep this as protected as possible so you can focus your energy leading up to the exam just on the MCAT. We don't want to be layering this in with other big events or required work as much as possible. So looking ahead at your calendar, where do you have the least amount of other things going on? That's usually a good time to take your exam. One MCAT myth that I do want to bust is that there are better test dates where the exam is easier or you score higher. I have just not seen that in my data, and I've been doing this for 7 going on 8 years. There's no one better or worse test date or time to take it. There's no one test date where the scores are easier or the exam form feels better. It's really more about how prepared you are and when is a good time in your life to take this exam where you can give it your best effort. So I have students take every single test date, and I really don't see a strong difference or a strong correlation between taking it in January versus taking it in April, except for the individual's life circumstances and making sure that they have the time, energy, and capacity to devote to this exam. The more you can free up your life on your MCAT year, your MCAT term, the better, because it's going to take a lot from you and you can't just stack it onto a full life. This is a part-time job at the least, and we want to make sure that you prioritize it as such. The last thing I want to touch on here is retaking. Many students do find themselves in a situation where they need to retake the MCAT exam for a variety of reasons. Maybe they voided an exam. When you void an MCAT exam, it counts as an attempt, but you don't see those scores, and medical schools never see that you took that exam. This happens if you get really sick on test day, or have a panic attack, or something happens in the middle that causes you to not be able to complete the exam, like a fire drill, things like that. So here's the deal with retakes. Retakes are fine, but again, we want to make sure that we're preparing and doing things differently than you did on your previous attempt if it didn't go according to plan. We don't want to make the same errors that we made last time. So making sure that you have enough time to really put quality effort into a retake. Another mistake I see students make is they'll take an exam and then retake it right away after. And you haven't given yourself time to both recover from that experience and improve your skills to actually see a strong improvement in scores. From everybody I've talked to in the medical admissions world, having 2 or even 3 retakes for the MCAT is not a red flag as long as we're seeing improvement or you have a good story about how you have overcome this challenge and gotten eventually to a goal score that you're happy applying with. What we don't want to see is back-to-back retakes with little to no improvement and a clear kind of panic of just trying to get this test done without being thoughtful about how you're approaching each attempt. Now, in terms of the logistics of a retake, you're only allowed to take the MCAT 3 times in a testing year maximum. So you can only take it a maximum of 3 times in 2026 and then 4 times in 2 years. So if you take it 3 times in 2026, you can only take it once in 2027. You can only take the MCAT 7 times in your lifetime. That includes if you void or no-show exams. We don't want to get to that point. Really what we're shooting for is 3 to 4 attempts if possible. Of course, I have students every year who are on their 5th, 6th, or even 7th attempt, and we get them there, but we really want to make sure that the attempt we're working with is the last attempt as much as humanly possible, especially for those that have taken this test several times. Now, there are, again, fees associated with this. You'll have to pay the full fee to retake. It's not a discount for taking it again. And again, if you cancel your exam, there are fees to that if you cancel, and you do not get your money back if you no-show or void. So financially, there's also a consideration as well. The final thing to consider before we talk about study plans in general is if you may qualify for accommodations. The AAMC allows a lot of different accommodations, regardless of what the reason is. So there are rooms by yourself, stop the clock breaks, extra time, paper exams. Even I've had students apply and get approved for a little extra break time. All of these things are dependent on a very specific application and usually a neuropsych evaluation. All the rules are on their accommodations part of their website. It does take up to 2 months to get your accommodations approved. And if you don't have the paperwork, again, usually a psychiatrist or a neuropsych eval, if you're talking about reading speed, ADHD, anxiety, anything like that, usually that's what's required in order to get approved for those accommodations. For things like you have medication you need to take, let's say you're a diabetic and need to have your insulin shots, those things usually go through pretty quickly. You'll get stop the clock breaks. But anything that's more procedural, like extra time requests or extra break times due to anxiety or distractibility, like room by yourself, you're going to need to prove that through documentation. So if you think you may qualify, I highly, highly recommend applying for those accommodations, especially if you have them in your current institution or previous institution. Again, medical schools will not see that you took the MCAT with accommodations. But if you think you may need accommodations in medical school, having had them through the AAMC will help your application for that as well. So it's definitely worth doing. If you are going to apply for accommodations, you are going to get your own registration time. You'll actually call a number and they'll help you work on getting a registration for a date of your choosing that aligns with your accommodation, so you will not go through the regular portal to do so. Just make sure that you wait on that because sometimes they double charge and then it's a whole thing. So just make sure if you're going to get accommodations, definitely get that paperwork in sooner rather than later since it takes up to 2 months, and then call the number to actually do your registration. That will come in your packet that they send you if you get approved. Okay, you've registered for your exam, you've picked your date, and now you're ready to start studying. There's a lot of different methods to studying for the MCAT. I've talked about it. I have a whole video about the different options for studying, self-studying versus classes versus one-on-one tutoring, and resources I really like. But today I really want to talk about your actual plan and the map of your timeline. The way I like to do this with my students is I like to divide the study plan into 3s. So let's say you have 6 months between now that you're watching this video and test day. So that means we have 3 8-week chunks or 2 months each. The first 2 months should be content focused, but I don't mean just starting at chapter 1 of an MCAT book and working your way through equally. What you want to do in the content focus section is make sure you're prioritizing your weakest areas, the things that have always felt rusty or difficult, the things that never really clicked in class. Anything you feel comfortable with will come back with practice. And we don't want to waste our valuable, limited content review time doing things you already know. Remember, not all content is created equal because not all of it is going to improve your MCAT scores. If you're already getting your questions right, you don't need to do those questions in content review. So about 70% of your time should be spent on doing content review on the things that you actively don't remember, have never learned, or has always been scared of. So that if you're studying 10 hours a week, 7 of those hours should be content review throughout the week. The remaining 3 hours should be practice problems. And you can use a variety of resources. The AAMC is great. All of my courses and programs use UWorld. I think they're an awesome resource. They have great explanations, but anything will work, especially at these early stages. So doing 3 hours roughly of practice problems in even that content review phase. What should you do practice problems on? Cars, because there's no content there, and any sciences that feel pretty comfortable for you. Anything that goes into that, yeah, I kind of remember that category, jump right to practice problems. The second 2 months or second 8-week block should be 50-50. Now, half of your time is spent reinforcing that content, going through your study guides, going through your Anki cards, relearning certain things that are still a little rusty. And then half of that time should be spent on practice problems on all the content categories. You're really starting to assess and see the different ways that the MCAT tests those topics. The final 2 months should be, again, 8 weeks, should be now flipped 30-70. 30% of your time on content, usually memorization here, really locking in the steps of metabolism, locking in some psych-soc terms, about 3 hours if you're doing a 10-hour week, And then 70% of your time should be doing active practice problems. I like to use the AAMC materials here, doing 30, 40, 50-minute sets, really building your endurance, building your practice, and getting that strategy locked down. Throughout all this, you're taking practice exams no less than once a month. So you should always take a practice exam at least once a month to assess where you're at, and no more than once a week. The maximum you should be taking exams is a full week in between to allow yourself to review, recharge, and try again. I like students to take between 7 and 8 practice exams before their full test, so you can spread those out according to those rules of at least once a month, no more than once a week. So that's the rough schedule, but what's the very first thing you're going to do? You're going to take a practice exam. I know it's intimidating. I know it's a little scary. You got to do that. You've got to know where you're starting in order to map out where you're going. What areas are those big, scary areas that you need to do content review on? What's actually feeling pretty solid that you can go right to practice problems? You won't know that until you take a full-length practice exam. And plus, the car section, no content. We've got to see where you're at as a baseline to know what to improve. So you've got to go right away, take that full-length practice exam, take it in as realistic settings as you can. I have a free mini course that takes you through how to take your first practice exam alongside my review tracker on how to review your exam and get the most from that experience and use it to build your study plan. So definitely go ahead and check that out. And of course, ask any questions in the comments from anything on this video. We want to make sure you're fully prepared for the MCAT 2026 season. Thank you so much and happy studying.